Good evening. Good evening. Oh, I can't whistle. We're going to start in just a minute. If you'd like to have a seat or grab a stand and sip area, grab another glass of wine. Joe's going to kick off the evening for us.
Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. So I hope you all have something to drink. I'm Joe DePrisco. I'm only going to be speaking for about another 70 minutes. I'm sort of feeling like William Jennings Bryan or something. No, I'm speaking for 8 minutes. 8 minutes. The longest 8 minutes of your life, I guarantee you. But I do want to welcome everybody. But first of all, I want to thank Postino, Marcus and Paul. There you go. They're right down the street, and they're open for business all the time. Anyway, Marcus and I go back when he was a teenager, like 4 or 5 years ago, and because we were working in the same restaurant and learning all about wine, and that was fun. And I want to thank the staff of the Lafayette Library and Learning Center Foundation, Sarah and Brian and Kathy and Elizabeth and everybody affiliated with the foundation. It's such a terrifically competent organization. It's impressively competent. And I want to thank the board of the Lafayette Library and Learning Foundation for everything you do. And especially I want to thank so many of you here tonight. Thank you for your friendship and support and invaluable first tranche seed contributions, your trust as founding donors you've placed in us, which humbles us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So let me cut to the chase. Here's what the Simpson Project does. Well, wait a second. When you work with nonprofits, you've heard this turn of phrase, the elevator pitch, right? And this is what you're supposed to do to condense your message to something you can actually convey as you're going up an elevator. Okay, I don't have an elevator pitch, but I think I have a good reason. And it's a good idea, an elevator pitch, but I don't have it. And the reason is we're not on an elevator with the Simpson Family Literary Project. We're walking up a mountain. It's a really cool and beautiful mountain, and when you get to the top, the air is great and the views are spectacular. So that's why there's no elevator pitch. So here's what we do. We lead Simpson Project writing workshops for kids, fledgling writers led by Simpson Fellows from Cal. We celebrate mid-career authors who win the $50,000 Simpson Literary Prize, like Geronimo Johnson, whom you'll get to meet in a second. And then we offer the Bay Area Joyce Carol Oates as writer-in-residence this winter-spring at the Lafayette Library. Writer-in-residence, more like conscience-in-residence, force-in-residence, dynamo-in-residence. So a clarifying word about what a mid-career means. And I was, Diane Johnson, who's a friend of the project and author of many blockbuster commercial and literary hits, she said to me, mid-career. She's been publishing for 40 years. She said, mid-career. I'm mid-career. And I said, yeah, you are, and mazel tov. And but we define mid-career this way. That is an author who has published 2 or 3 works of fiction, either novels or short stories. And believe it or not, well, you do believe it, there are many, 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 many talented writers that fit that category. And we receive nominations from all over the country for the prize. We're beginning right now the jury process for the 2nd year. Anyway, so the Simpson Family Literary Project is at heart also a literacy project. And you know, I think the mission of the project might best be expressed in song. But fortunately for you, I'm not going to sing it. But it would be really cool if I could. Because I want to invoke our mantra, which is this: storytelling is the foundation of a literate society. Hold that thought. And let me tell you a story about the founding of the project, because I think that story will be clearer than any cool website, and we have a very cool website, by the way, and clearer than any glossy, expensive brochure, which we don't have. In Penelope Fitzgerald's Blue Flower, somebody says, if a story begins with finding, it must end with searching. If a story begins with finding, it must end with searching. Hold that thought too. There are lots of great stories, maybe all great stories, that begin once upon a time. There's that grace note of wonder, once upon a time. So let me tell you a secret that's no secret at all by now. Storytelling is the foundation of a literate society. Stories nurture community, nurture tolerance, nurture understanding, nurture hope, they nurture the heck out of children and adults of all generations. So help me out here. All together. Storytelling is the foundation of a literate society. I didn't believe that. Let's try it again with more feeling. Storytelling is the foundation of a literate society. Don't forget that. So it is, once upon a time, June 10th, 2015, there was an event at Patty and my house in Lafayette. The English department had a big event. Hanaro made his debut as department chair. Don McQuaid organized the whole thing, 100 people there. Bob Hass read. It was great. It was a wonderful night. And at the end of the night, we could see that people had a gleam in their eye. Well, not that gleam in their eye, but they had a gleam in their eye, and unlike most gleams in the eye, this took a long time for people to act on, or a while. And in that fall of 2015, the Lafayette Library and Learning Center Foundation and the English department started to meet. And we all found out that we had lots of common aspirations, goals, and interests. And we also realized what we were on the verge of doing was creating a unique private-public partnership, a unique private-public partnership dedicated to storytelling at its deepest meaning. We knew we wanted to enrich the lives of kids, underserved kids, kids across the spectrum, Cal students, teachers in schools, librarians throughout the Bay Area, fledgling authors, professional authors. We knew we had common interests there. And And let's be crystal clear about what storytelling means. There's a very famous statement by William Carlos Williams, the short story writer and poet, and I'm going to revise it for tonight. He said, "It is difficult to get the news from stories, yet people die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." It's that urgent, storytelling. In any case, millions of meetings ensued with the English department and the foundation. Email chains flowered, and we formed a plan for a literary project that was also a literacy project. Because as Toni Morrison said, if there is a book that you want to read but hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. That's why we're all in when it comes to younger writers, mid-career authors, and iconic authors. In any case, 210 days after that June meeting, there was a momentous meeting on January 12, 2016, at Papillon Cafe, which is a stone's throw distance. Well, it's stone's throw if you're a javelin Olympic athlete. It's down the road over there. And the project committee said, take this meeting. And so I took the meeting. And I met with Sharon Simpson and my dear friend, along with her husband, Barclay, whom we all dearly miss, and a dearest friend to both Cal and the Lafayette Library and so many other causes. And when I met with Sharon, I said, we would like to dedicate this project, we would like to call it the Simpson Family Literary Project. And I won't give you all the color of the conversation that took place then. If you know Sharon, it was a little bit of an emotional moment. But she said yes, she'd be honored. I said, the honor is all ours. And we happily accepted the naming of the Simpson Family Literary Project, because there's no family who has had a greater impact on the Bay Area, California, and the world than the Simpsons. And at that point, we were off to the races. And 593 days after that Papillon meeting, or 953 days after that June 10th party, takes us to right here, right now, tonight at the beautiful Lafayette Library. And we gather here 953 days later because we're dedicated to enriching the lives of young people by helping them to tell their stories, by offering writing workshops taught by Simpson Fellows drawn from the Cal. I better introduce the members of the project committee because they're going to be able to speak much better to you about it individually. And let me do that right now. There's Don McQuaid, who is a founding Simpsonista, Vice Chancellor Emeritus at Cal, English professor, author. Karen Mulvaney, a new member of the project committee. There's Beth Needle, a founding Simpsonista, who is the executive director of the Lafayette Library Learning Center Foundation. There's Renato Padilla, who's the chair of the English department, founding member of the project, author, professor, also a vice chancellor emeritus. You guys get out of those jobs easy, all these vice chancellors, emeritus, huh? Scott Saul, a new member of the project committee, author, English professor. Vicky Shaka, a founding Simpsonista, who is the library manager and the force that keeps all this together. And Joyce Carol Oates, too. Although she is stuck at Princeton tonight, she sends her best wishes. She'll be here winter, spring, where she'll do events with Geronimo and other people, including giving a talk to librarians throughout the whole Bay Area. So if a story begins with finding, it must end with searching. So let me tell you who we'll be searching with this year. In this pilot year, this outreach into schools and communities. Girls Inc. in downtown Oakland, serving girls throughout the East Bay. Julaine Virgil is the CEO, former student of mine, dear former student of mine. She's at some big conference getting some big award. She sends her regards. We're proud to be working with them. Why Girls Inc.? Because, man, it's Girls Inc. It's Girls Inc. And to quote Maya Angelou, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And then we're working in Contra Costa County Juvenile Hall. Noelle Birch, who's our resident beacon of light. Where are you, Noelle? There you are. We'll be working with incarcerated young African-American men, as it happened, leading a writing workshop there. This is my letter to the world, says Emily Dickinson, that never wrote to me. And then we're also working with Northgate High School in Walnut Creek. Northgate is a member of is part of the Mount Diablo School District. David Wood, my longtime friend and colleague, and somebody who owes me a lot of money, who is here. Oh, I owe you money. That's right. That's the other way around. Anyway, he's our contact at Northgate, and that's what we're looking forward to. And we're going to be looking forward to doing some publishing of student works. So, to sum it up, the Simpson Family Literary Project helps shape and celebrate new generations of writers and readers. It celebrates fantastic mid-career authors like Geronimo Johnson and iconic authors like Joyce Carol Oates, and future iconic authors who are at Girls Inc., or at Juvie, or at Northgate High School. It's all important. It's all of a piece, because storytelling is the foundation of a literate society. And a literate society is the foundation of, well, everything. Storytelling is the foundation of a literate society. Don't forget it. All right, good. Now I want to introduce Geronimo Johnson, T. Geronimo Johnson. I had an exchange recently with Ron Charles, who's the editor, the book editor at the Washington Post, and telling him about tonight and about the prize. And he said, "What a fantastic choice." If you look on the cover of Welcome to Braggsville, you'll see Ron Charles with a rave review of Geronimo's book. He's just back from Rome. He's amazing. He living in Rome a lot these days. So, because he just won the prestigious Rome Prize from the American Academy in Rome. So, many people are Italophiles in this room, so if anybody has restaurant recommendations, make sure you get them to Geronimo before he takes off. And I know, Patty, you have some recommendations. So, Geronimo is a brilliant, original thinker and a writer of poise, of precision, and of passion. Concepts not typically linked when it comes to a writer. He's the living, breathing antidote to hopelessness and cynicism. And God knows we could all use a dose of that. I could go on and read all the citations pertaining to him, all the prizes and short lists and honors he's received. He's an impressive, his accomplishments are tremendously impressive, and we're honored that he's the inaugural winner of the Simpson Literary Prize. And I'll end with this. I think his audacity is matched only by his compassion, and also by the wiliest, trustiest sidekick of compassion, and that's a madcap sense of humor. Mr. Johnson, please.
Good evening. How's everyone doing? That's good, that's good. I've met some of you, and others I'm sure I'll meet a little bit later in the evening. I want to thank you all sincerely for coming out to an event that's about books, right? The book is, it's an endangered artifact. You know, so when I come to an event like this and I see so many people here honoring the tradition of literature and the art which I think most defines the human experience, I'm heartened. So I thank you all. I also need to acknowledge Joe DePrisco, Donald McQuaid, Karen Mulvaney, Beth Needle, Genaro Padilla, Scott Saul. Vicky, I want to say schiaccia, according to my Italian tutor. And the incomparable, I'm going to call her JCO, Joyce Carol Oates. That is the Simpson Project Committee, and my mother says you all have phenomenal taste in literature. So I'm only going to speak for 5 minutes. I think I may have used 4 of them. What I want to add to that, of course, is a note of appreciation for my parents who didn't spontaneously combust when I expressed the desire to be a writer, which sounds like a bit of a foolhardy journey. And I want to just mention a little bit perhaps about the power of storytelling and something that came to my mind when I was asked to write a review of several books related to the recent racial strife here in America. And one of the things I was trying to do at the beginning of this review is make sense of the history of the racial conflict in America, which means trying to make sense of the very notion of race. And 2 stories arose at the beginning of this essay that I was trying to get, you might say, like involved in a dance. And one was the story of the history of black skin as presented in the Bible. There's a bit of a mark or curse. The other is the story that comes from the classics, which is the story of Phaeton, the son of Apollo. And it's another explanation for black skin. And it says simply that Phaeton, anxious to drive the sun chariot before he could actually control it, lost the reins. The chariot came too close to the earth. It scorched the ground and the people, and hence we have Ethiopia. 2 very different stories, 2 very different notions of what it means to be a person described by those stories. So we don't often realize how much they're constructing our reality, but our entire reality is story. And last night, we had an event on Berkeley's campus, and a young man asked me, he was despairing a little bit, what we could do to prepare more minorities for STEM programs. He's a self-described Spanish speaker, and his complaint was that 3 weeks into the semester, he had met no other Spanish speakers. And as we know, public education is under a little bit of an attack right now. It's being eviscerated. And I didn't have anything hopeful to offer him. And that stayed with me as I fell asleep. And it's the first thing that I thought of this morning. It was just really heavy on my heart that I couldn't offer him a clean solution, that I couldn't offer him something that he could take home and kind of put under his pillow. So I thought about what gives me hope. And what gives me hope is projects like this one, libraries like this one, and people like you. Thank you for supporting literature.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So now I'd like to introduce somebody who, if it weren't for many of the things we take for granted as wonderful at the library and the foundation, would never take place. And that is somebody who has been I got to say, a friend and inspiration to me for a long time, somebody I'm honored to work with, and that's why I want to introduce now, and because I want you to know that the project would not happen, and so many great things would not happen out here. Let me just take a step back we moved to Lafayette 5 years ago, and the day I met Vicky Shaka and Beth Needle, that was a great day. That's sort of my life changed. I said, what that's kind of cool out here. I miss Berkeley. Lived in Berkeley for a long time, forever. Went to grade school, high school, graduate school in Berkeley. But Lafayette, well, I did want to escape the harsh Berkeley summers. I'll say that. Those are wicked summers. But anyway, so Lafayette is for me. Lafayette is a wonderful place because of the person I'm about to introduce, and I think she is a terrific executive director and a terrific force for good. Beth Needle.
I was going to say nice things about Joe. So tonight when we celebrate authors and literature and education and the magic that can happen when great Bay Area institutions come together, we have to remember the person who brought it all together, and that's someone who is creative, intuitive, resolute, determined, and dapper, and that's Joe DePrisca. This literary project was his idea, and he is the singular force behind it. And he rallied all of us, like herding cats, for years and years until this finally happened, and I couldn't be happier. So it is because of Joe that tonight we come together to celebrate and honor Geronimo, and that we come together to celebrate and get really excited about the future of what we can do for education and for young people in our communities. Segue, I'm also here to talk about the Book at Theater Company. Last spring, I was trolling the internet looking at reviews for Welcome to Braggsville, and I happened to notice a review for the play Welcome to Braggsville that was being what was the word I was looking for? I was going to say hosted in Seattle. And I was really excited. First of all, it's not a theater production that you hear about on a regular basis. It was something a little different. Also, it was in Seattle, and also it was 5 blocks from my son's home. And also, I noticed that Geronimo was going to speak one afternoon, and we had just awarded him this wonderful prize. So I bought a couple tickets, hopped on a plane, grabbed my son and his girlfriend, herded them off to see a production of a book they had not read, did not know anything about. And for a day and a half after we saw this production, we could not stop talking about it. It affected us immensely. It affected me so much that in addition to being moved and excited by this book, after I heard them speak and after I saw the production, I ran out the doorway, grabbed Josh and Damon and Geronimo, and asked them to come to Lafayette tonight. So the Book at Theater Company is, I wish they were here. They would have been a perfect partner for us because they bring the books we love to life. And so I'm going to introduce Josh, my son, and he's going to get up here and he's going to talk a little bit about the scenes that he is going to, they're going to perform for you this evening. So, Josh?
Hi, Beth, thank you so much for that great introduction. And Joe, Beth, Geronimo, thank you very much. Without you guys, we wouldn't be here tonight, and we're thrilled to be here. I'm Josh Ossing. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Book at Repertory Theater in Seattle. Our mission is to transform great literature into great theater and to inspire our audiences to read. We have been producing adaptations, world premiere adaptations of literature over 28 years. And there's over 100 adaptations to the company's history. What you're going to see here tonight, and what we're so honored to present, is a few excerpts from Booket's production of Welcome to Braggsville, adapted by Damon Arundel and myself. There may be some folks who may not be totally familiar with this story, so we just want to provide a little bit of context. Duran, the sensitive good old boy from Braggsville, Georgia, flees his stifling hometown, comes to Berkeley, the intellectual haven, and of course struggles to fit in even there. he befriends 3 other Berkeley misfits: Lewis, a Malaysian American aspiring comedian who desires to be the next Lenny Bruce Lee. Charlie, an African American from Chicago, Bronzeville, the youngest and the smartest of the group, and then Candace, a white Iowan who claims 1/8 Native American heritage. So what you're going to see here, we've got performers, and they should be coming out here soon. Do we want to get? So we're gonna show you a few brief excerpts of Act 1, and then we've got a little video. Damon's going to be providing a little contextualization because we're kind of hopping around. We've got Duran, Lewis, Charlie, and the poet. Unfortunately, Candace couldn't be here. And a key figure that you'll see in tonight, and that was a key figure in this adaptation, is the role of the poet, which is a character who's obviously not in the book, but whose voice and essence and language is very much of the book, and the poet is a guide and an instigator to the characters and the audience in this production. So, yeah.
Begin with that. Poor K.
Poor K, no.
Because.
Because.
So I'll ask. I'm going to say what I remember last night at the English department. Scott and Hanaro did such a great job organizing. You said 3 things that I've been thinking about ever since, and they sort of reverberated today. And I hope I can remember the 3 of them, because one was you made a remark about the intolerance that people have for intolerance. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And I don't know if that helps us understand what's going on in this play. And there were a couple other things, and I'll just hold off for now. But when you see your imaginative work adapted, what's that like? I mean, there's a character. The poet is not a character in the novel, for instance, and you see what these wonderful actors and directors and producers at the Book and Theater did with your play. Do you learn stuff about what you did when you see it staged like this?
Well, I mean, it's a completely different experience. I'm thoroughly impressed with what Bookit has done. They're like my play cousins now. And when I went to see the play, I did not have high expectations. I didn't really have any expectations. I assumed they would just lift the dialogue and insert it in the actors' mouths. And I ended up having this completely unanticipated emotional experience of being outside of my work and having it thrust upon me. I think that's the closest I could have come to reading my book as someone who didn't write it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it was very new, and I've never experienced anything like that with something that I've read, and the experience was so profoundly moving for me. Also, being in the audience and seeing how other people were reacting, that I went back. I came back to Berkeley, and I told my partner Elizabeth and my mom and the baby. The baby was very little at this point. It was like, baby, we're going on a road trip, and we all turned around and went right back up to Seattle. I think maybe 3 or 4 days later, mm-hmm. because the show was coming to an end, because I wanted them to see it as well, because I couldn't fully describe that feeling of actually seeing it brought to life with bodies in real time. And I think that it was like visceral for me in a way that it isn't quite when you're writing it.
So it's another way to ask this question that's on my mind relative to you is, so your relationship to audience, mm-hmm. when you're writing, mm-hmm. when you're by yourself at your desk or wherever it is you write, do thoughts of audience ever enter into your mind? Do you imagine a kind of panorama in which these characters take on a certain life? which goes to the next. When you saw this production, were you surprised by something? Was there something in there that you didn't see before? And did that happen when you were composing, or as the book was getting ready for publication, and people told you about what they were thinking about the book? Like, for instance, like last night, somebody said this is a campus novel, and you said, I'd never planned to write a campus novel. It was the first. Or you said you didn't, until you moved to Berkeley, you didn't know you were a Southern writer. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess I'm wondering what goes on for you as a writer as you confront the sort of independent life of these characters, these sentences, these images. They take on a life of their own. What do they teach you? Where do they take you?
Okay, well, to answer the question in the middle first, what I didn't anticipate was the introduction of the poet serving as the narrator, and how that would bring to life those passages that kind of collapse everyone's point of view. And that just brought a tremendously unexpected element to the play, as we saw here with this kind of becomes this interrogation, which was really astounding, because those are the parts of the play that, of the novel that would otherwise be the most opaque, and I know that, and those were my actual responses. That opacity was my response to my editor's demand for clarity. Mm-hmm. In fact, right? I felt like I could only give more emotional clarity, not linguistic clarity. Mm-hmm. But in terms of audience, I think about audience all the time, which is why when the gentleman asked about the campus novel, I didn't think that I was writing a campus novel, and I said it didn't really matter to me what people would think in 20 years, or whether or not I'm in the canon, or whether or not I'm dead, what happens when I'm dead, because I'm responding to what's going on in the world around me right now. And obviously a novel is not the most efficient medium for responding to the immediate world, but I write novels, so that's what I have to do. If I was a painter, I would paint. If I was a filmmaker, I would make films, but my concern is about suffering today and how that may snowball into suffering in the future, and I'm writing today and thinking about this moment. And so at this moment, when I'm writing, and I write in a cloffice, which is a closet office. Okay. Yeah. So that's between us, right? We're friends. That's between us. And they have a nice place at the academy, though.
Oh.
Yeah, big windows and all.
With espresso machine and
yeah, right downstairs.
A little pizza.
Oh, yeah, it's lovely. And the thing is, I think about a hostile audience. So when I'm writing, I don't really think about people who agree with me or would readily accept my point of view, because I don't think that those people need to read my work. I could just call them and say, guess what, I saw this thing, it was really crazy or upsetting, and they would say, oh yeah, of course it was, and then we would laugh and say, should we go have a drink? So as a writer, simply because a novel takes so long to read, and it forces the reader to have this experience in life, like in real time, over 3 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, however long it takes. For me, I imagine it to be most beneficial if it can offer an experience that's somewhat transformative, or allows you to inhabit the skin of someone else, or to think a little bit differently about the world. So I do think very concretely about an audience, but I think about that audience as being someone at some emotional and experiential remove from me, and the novel is my medium of bridging the distance between two human beings.
Which certainly comes through, that your artistry, your command of language, your insight into human nature is the bridge. Yeah. So let's talk, maybe we can talk, if you don't mind, maybe we can talk about the arc of your career, if you don't mind my using that expression.
Well, we're at, if it's a mid-career award, we know where I am. I'm right here, and then it's downhill. So, thanks for breaking the news.
Yeah, well, we have a senescent literary prize. So we Hold It Till It Hurts, mm-hmm. to Braggsville, and in case you don't know this, writers hate to talk about books that aren't done. so I'm not going to ask him that because he'll get really, it's a touchy issue. Although he was such a gentleman last night, he actually talked about it a little bit. It was so kind of you. Did you tell the truth about it? No, you didn't. No, of course not. But anyway, so when you think about the arc of your career and where you've begun and where you are and where you're going, what are the things that have meant the most to you in this career? I mean, you've had a tremendous amount of success, much more success than the average writer. What's it feel like?
It doesn't really, like the success doesn't really feel like anything. In that I just continue to work and I do my work without regard for the reward that's at the other end of it. So the success is very much separate from the labor of being at the desk typing. The success that resonates with me are the moments when somehow the work opens up a space between me and another person and we have a conversation that we wouldn't have had otherwise, or there's a connection that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And to me, that's tangible, whereas the success is also ephemeral. I mean, I could fall out of favor. We're in an atmosphere, I could make one wrong comment and then be assassinated on social media or something. You know, I don't know. So the reality for me that matters is that human connection. So with Hold It Till It Hurts, for example, I didn't think anything was going to go well for that book. Took a year to get it sold. Well, it took a year to find an agent, and then like another year to get it sold. That's not a long time, but it was a long time to me. It's like a very long time to me, and because my agent was on the transparency model, sort of like if you have a cat that kills birds and brings them into your kitchen to let you know, hey, I'm working. I'm working.
Oh, the rejection letters, you mean? Oh, they're lovely.
Yeah. My agent, he wanted to prove that he was working by sending me every single rejection letter. Right. So that was my reading. So, it was just a real kick in the teeth. And so at the other end of it, when I sold this book we sold this book to a small press with which I wasn't familiar.
Great press.
It is a great press.
Yeah.
I did not know at the time.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, it's all over. And not only is it all over, it was going to be over with the agent because the agent said, well, if this doesn't happen, I have a list of other presses. I'm going to email you. Right, and then I would get to work generating my own rejection letters.
Yeah.
I would be the cat. This is my cat saying, you kill the birds now. So then this strange thing happened. Nothing was happening with the book, and I was in a bookstore, and after a reading, a lady comes up to me and she says, my son just got back from Afghanistan, and he will not talk to me, and now I understand why. And that was it. You know, and I could, you know, almost cry like thinking about that moment. That's when it became real. And that's when I understood, like viscerally and experientially, the power of art and what's really at stake.
It's a sacred calling. I mean, you can get pretentious about it, as I just did, but it's also a business where you get rejection letters, but it's that moment of connection with an individual person or an audience, like tonight.
And I felt like, and I remember telling a few people close to me, it's like, because I hadn't won anything. And I said, that's my award. That's my award.
We throw it open a little bit? Shall we throw it open a little bit? Any comments or questions or no rejection letters, please? Yeah, David.
No, that cat actually decided to become a dog, which I think is good for the animal kingdom.
Can y'all hear their question? Okay. The question is, Is there something, fear, is that the word, of social media, fear of being attacked? Does this have an impact on your writing?
And it's one thing, for the rest of us not to want to say something because we're have a fear of being attacked, but for somebody like you who's a writer who has things to say, that's a little scary that you might be out saying something.
So what's different about being a writer, being unliked or trashed on social media?
Yeah, I think about it, but it's really only at the margins of my awareness because I don't spend a lot of time on social media for that reason. The thing is, I'm very impressionable. Like, I just kind of realized this about myself. And it could have been from being raised Catholic, You feel like you're always being watched.
Careful now, careful.
And so, but by a kind overlord.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Your mom and I.
Yes.
Yeah, we can tell.
But but I do think about it, and I try to not think about it when I'm writing. Generally, when I'm writing, what I do is aim to move towards the fear. So when I start to feel uncomfortable or worry that something might not work, then I step closer to it and just try to double down on like sort of the compassion or the fairness around how I'm presenting it. But in terms of my public persona, I'm aware of those pitfalls, and I think the strategy I've taken may not be the best one, but I just generally don't participate in it. Yeah, to kind of keep my mind straight. There's a saying by the Buddha that I use for that. The Buddha told this man who was very angry with him and wanted to kill him, he said, have you ever had a guest come to your house and offer you a gift you didn't want? And the man said, yeah. And the Buddha said, did you take it? And the man said, no. And the Buddha said, well, that's you and your anger this evening. I'm not accepting that gift. And so that's how I try to position myself vis-a-vis the social media.
Would you mind if I tell people what happened when we had our first conversation?
Not at all.
So the jury for the Simpson Prize came up with a short list of authors for the prize, and that's the way prizes work, and then winnowed down from there. So I reached out to Geronimo, and we had a very nice conversation, long conversation. Turned out we had a mutual friend who was a big influence on you, and it was touching, and it was good. And the last thing he said to me was, I'm going to forget we ever had this conversation. I thought it was amazing. I'm just going to forget that we had this conversation, which I took to mean I'm not going to be disappointed. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to carry this around. Okay, something like that. So I called him up a month or so later and said, guess what? You won. And he said, no! Which I thought was the most affirming no I've ever heard in my life. So that was wonderful. That was a wonderful exchange. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Could you please tell us a little about yourself? I apologize for not recognizing your evidence.
How about dance? Can we do it in dance form? A little Martha? No, go on.
Yeah, the floor's too slippery. Yeah.
Let me do this.
Okay.
Born in New Orleans. Went to school, I think, in New Orleans for a while.
Yeah, between New Orleans and Maryland.
Maryland, and then got an MFA at University of Iowa, the famous writing workshop. Was a Stegner Fellow at Stanford. Taught at Stanford. Taught at Oregon State. Taught at Texas State, San Marcos. Taught at Cal. Taught at San Quentin. Did I say Oregon State?
I'm more interested in this personality. I mean, there are some pretty angry passages in this little vignette we saw.
Oh, you want to?
What caused those?
What caused the anger in the vignette that you saw? That's an interesting question because it has so many particular ramifications. I'm not sure whether or not you're asking me if I have some anger in me. Is that what you're asking? Or what are you asking?
You seem to be a highly privileged
Yeah, I think that I'm going to have to talk to Book It about their PR work because they're making me look angry with the vignettes that they're choosing. We're no longer play cousins, okay? Yeah, stay on that side of the room. Okay, yeah. You know, there are times when America, for example, as a nation, has entered wars in which we weren't at that moment involved because we felt that there was some injustice that we needed to redress. So someone, in the upper echelons of government decided that they were going to commit a lot of money and a lot of manpower and put a lot of lives on the line for people who aren't even in this country. And we're on the whole a privileged country. So I'm not sure that I would say that anyone's appearance of privilege, which is first of all quite superficial, in and of itself exonerates them from having concern for others or in any way means that they wouldn't. And I would actually suggest that the opposite is true, in that privilege means responsibility and duty for those that don't yet have what you have.
Any other comments? Is that Ann? Again, yes. And then Chrissy. Ann and then Chrissy. Yeah.
Two things. One, my book club has read your book, and it elicited wonderful discussions
No spoiler alert. Careful.
by older women talking about race, which we don't normally do, which I thought was really great that you're able to portray something that can elicit intellectual conversation and open people's minds to things. Also, I want to compliment you on capturing an essence of Berkeley. I went there a long time ago, back in the 60s. But the whole idea that is still relevant there of performance art, of trying to be so idealistic that you think you can teach other people things sometimes. You captured that beautifully, and that has been an essence of the university for generations.
That was such a great question. I mean, thank you. And thank you for reading, and I'm glad the book club enjoyed it. That means a lot. Thank you.
Chrissy?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chrissy. What was that?
Can we hear the question again?
Okay, he was being funny. It was what Ann said was she had a great experience with the book club, a great discussion. It was a ladies' book club discussing race and gender issues through a discussion of the novel, and then how it captured so well the experience at Berkeley, where she went to school, I think, in the 90s. Was that it? Oh, yeah. Who can remember the 60s? What are you kidding? Yes, Chrissy.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with your work, and I'm enjoying this evening, and I would be very interested to see how this particular novel, which obviously, has won this prize, fits in the context of your other work. And how did you begin? Did you begin just writing poetry? Did you begin always writing novels or short stories? And were they always in this vein, or how do you see it as a development? Did you hear that right there?
Yeah, so how does this novel fit in terms of his overall development? And just one point of clarification in case this isn't clear, and that is the Simpson Prize is given to an author, not to a book. It's to a career, mid-career. Anyway.
So I did start off writing poetry in high school. It was very bad. There were lots of flames on the walls of my heart. And
They're still there. They're still there.
Yeah. And so I left all those like flickering shadows to the smart people who actually can write poetry. And I came to prefer the novel as a form, that delivers an experience, kind of a longer moment outside of yourself. But, the thing I'd been pushing at and getting around to, the pressing question became clear to me after Hurricane Katrina when I was watching the coverage. And some people would talk about the refugees, some people would talk about how the city deserved to drown for various reasons. And there was a lot of commentary that seemed to overlook the fact that they were reporting on people, like dying in the moment. And so at that moment when I'm watching that coverage, the question became clear and I could articulate it for the first time. And the question is, how do we learn to care about people who are not like ourselves? And so that's the thread that kind of runs through the work.
Maybe one last comment. Regan.
I read your book, I liked it very much. One of the things that really struck me when I first started reading it, the very first chapter, was what I would call verbal pyrotechnics. The actual sentences were just like on fire with your word choices, long sentences that threw in a lot of ideas and a lot of images. And I just wondered, did you ever have a English teacher that encouraged you to do that, or who said, whoa, it's too much in one sentence, you should curb that, and you said, no, this is what I want to do. But it's so distinctive and so special, and it just grabs the reader by the throat. And so I'd love to know how you feel about that, and has it always been in your work, or is it special to Braggsville, or what? Because that's the only book of yours I've read.
So Regan McMahon, a book reviewer, is asking a question about a very good book reviewer, an editor, is asking about, made a comment that from the first pages of Welcome to Braggsville, she was impressed by the pyrotechnics of the style. And she was wondering, she said this much better than I'm saying it, she was wondering, was there a teacher along the way who had an impact one way or another on you to continue this risk-taking kind of prose style?
Not so much stylistically. I did have a teacher in 9th grade, an English teacher, Mrs. Shertock, who would never give me 100. It was always 98, 98, 98, 98. And so I became obsessed with this last 2%, right? This notion that you can always go a little bit farther. In terms of the language of this book, it's, I would say, it's unique to this book, and I adjust for each project according to what feels right, and according to like how much distance, how much of a buffer I think the language needs to provide between, just how much of a firewall we need, so to speak. And so with this book, I felt that it demanded that type of language and that kind of clip in order to launch you headlong into these events. Whereas the first book, Hold It, is very, very patient and slow, because it's kind of a slow burn, and we're spending a lot of time kind of like watching one character's mind as it turns on itself and moves through itself into the open, like, wider world. So I adjust for the project. Yeah.
Lori, did you have your hand raised?
Thank you. I guess I was thinking what your family must have thought, to have a son like you who suddenly was such a creative writer. What an amazing, wonderful thing. You must have been thrilled and maybe even confused by how this happened.
Did your mom love you is the question.
Yeah, I think so. She did say, I think it was last year, that she found a report card from 2nd grade, and the teacher had written, he likes to write very, 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 very long stories.
All right. Any last thoughts you want to share with us?
My brain freezes. Did I thank my parents when I was up there earlier?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Okay, and my friends.
So you have Jewish and Catholic parents.
Yes.
I see that. Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
So it's an exciting and brilliant venture that's underway, and I think that you should, since you award an author, not a book. I don't have a book coming out next year, but I think that you should award me again, right?
We'll take it. So that's great. I just want to say, just coming attraction, T. Geronimo Johnson will be here in March, coming back from Rome to be here for 2 weeks at Cal, the English department, and at the Lafayette Library. All kinds of events, maybe some yoga classes. You're good at that. Anyway, this has been a wonderful night. I think we're so happy that Geronimo is with us, and that we're so happy that you joined us tonight. There's a lot of food and wine left. Please enjoy yourself. Thank you, everybody. Oh, yeah. And yes, don't you dare leave before you talk to somebody from the library staff. You will really regret that. What's the matter? Yes, before you leave, you're going to get a book, an autographed book by T. Geronimo Johnson.